Hello and welcome to this week's lecture. I am Teacher Kristen, and this week we'll be exploring the early humans of South Africa. This is part one of a two-part lecture series in which we'll be diving deep into the prehistoric roots of human civilization in South Africa and exploring why the region known as the cradle of humankind is so important, not just to South Africa, but to the world. So, whether you love archaeology or just like cool stories about ancient humans, this is for you. So settle in, grab a cup of tea, and learn about not only the history of early humans in South Africa, but the early history of humanity as a whole. Welcome to the fascinating journey into South Africa's distant past. Long before cities, farming, or written records, this land was home to some of the earliest people on Earth. From ancient hunter gatherers creating rock art to early kingdoms trading gold, South Africa has been a stage for human stories for hundreds of thousands of years. In this lecture, we'll explore how people lived, migrated, and built societies, and why this region is called the cradle of humankind. Get ready to meet our earliest ancestors and uncover how their lives shaped the world we know today. Today, we will discuss the following. First, we will start with some key vocabulary that you will need to understand exactly what we will be talking about today. Then we will go over the history of the Stone Ages in South Africa and the interesting movements and innovations made by the early human inhabitants of our country. Then we will talk about the early kingdoms found in southern Africa. And lastly, we will discuss the cradle of humankind and why it is so important to the whole world. First, let's start with some vocabulary. The first word we will look at is archaeology, which is the study of ancient things people have left behind, like tools, bones, or art. Archaeologists study everything that we have left behind, from the smallest piece of art to the homes in which we lived. They will study anything from structures to microscopic fragments of pottery. Just imagine, maybe in 3,000 years' time, archaeologists will be studying these strange glowing rectangles that the people of 2025 placed so much importance on. Archaeology is closely related to paleontology, which is the study of ancient life through fossils. So, paleontology doesn't only study the history of humans, but the history of life all over. So, which field of study is more likely to examine the body of a fossilized fish? Right, it would be paleontology. When we look at the study of archaeology and paleontology in South Africa, the most important part of it is the study of hominids, which is the scientific name for the big evolutionary family that includes humans and our ancient relatives. Through this family, we can tell how we went from ape like creatures to the upright bipedal creatures that we are today. The hominid family also shows the process of evolution, which can be defined as the slow changes in living things over a long time that help them survive. One of the most obvious evolutions that humans went through is learning to walk upright. We learned to walk upright in order to stay safe in the long grasses of the African savanna. When we crouched over and walked on all fours, it was difficult for us to see predators such as lions and leopards. But if we stood, we were able to look over the grass and see any approaching predators. This is why we evolved to walk on two legs. You can witness evolution happening today. Some people, like your teacher, have been born without their wisdom teeth because over time these teeth have been rendered unnecessary by the fact that we make food for ourselves that is easy to eat. And now, because need to eat, we don't need such strong teeth, we some of us are being born without our wisdom teeth. We can also map the evolution of early human ancestors through following the migration patterns of our ancestors across Africa. Migration is when people or animals move from one place to another. Most of the time, when people migrate, it is because of food or water. Can you think of any major migrations of animals or people where they move from one place to another in search of food or water? One of the most famous examples is the Serengeti migrations. Lastly, we will look at pastoralism, which is a lifestyle where people raise animals like cows, sheep, or goats for food, milk, and other animal products. This is different from hunter gatherers who live off the land. This means that hunter gatherers only survive on what they can find out in the wild. They do not purposefully grow crops or raise animals in order to eat them. They only hunt and scavenge for food within their natural surroundings. Right, now that we have finished with our vocabulary, let us move on to the Stone Ages in South Africa. The prehistory of South Africa lasts from the Middle Stone Age until the 17th century. Southern Africa was first reached by Homo sapiens, that's us, before 130,000 years ago, possibly before 260,000 years ago. The Middle Stone Age covers the period from 300,000 to 50,000 years ago. The hunter-gatherers of southern Africa, named the Sun by their pastoral neighbors, the Khoikhoi, and Bushmen by Europeans, are in all likelihood direct descendants of the first anatomically modern humans to migrate to southern Africa more than 130,000 years ago. When we speak about the first anatomically modern humans, we speak about the first of our human ancestors that looked the same way that we do now. So, the sun and the Khoikhoi show us exactly when we became the humans we know ourselves to be. It is thought that the Homo sapiens populations ancestral to the Khoisan of southern Africa have represented the largest human population during the majority of the anatomically modern human timeline. They were much more widespread than today, but their modern habitat was reduced due to their decimation by over the course of the Bantu expansion. These people were dispersed throughout much of southern and southeastern Africa. During the Middle Stone Age, the climate fluctuated between glacial, rainy, and increasingly humid weather. Doesn't that sound familiar? Maybe we are going back to the Middle Stone Age. Or maybe it's just climate change. This fluctuating climate caused the early hunter gatherers of South Africa to adapt their technological advancements, movements, and foraging strategies. This leads us to the discussion of the early innovations of our ancestors in South Africa. If we want to talk about early innovations in our history, it is best that we start with talking about the Blombos Cave, which contains personal ornaments and what are presumed to be the tools used for the production of artistic imagery, as well as bone tools. The production of such personal decoration, such as beads and jewelry, indicates a level of creativity that was unknown before this time. This shows our ability to dream, to be imaginative, and to actually be more human than we maybe are already today. Beginning around 2000 years ago, there are traces of pastoralism. If you can remember, pastoralism is a lifestyle where people raise livestock such as cattle and goats. This reflects the arrival of the Khoikhoi herders. From this time, hunting and gathering gradually gave way to herding as the dominant economic activity. The arrival of livestock is thought to have introduced concepts of personal wealth and property ownership, as well as the establishment of a political structure of chiefdoms. It was long believed at around the middle of the first millennium that the Bantu expansion reached southern Africa from the Niger River Delta, but recent archaeological work places the presence of Bantu speakers in the region as early as the 3rd century after Christ. The Bantu speakers not only had domestic animals, but also practiced agriculture, farming millet, sorghum, and other crops. They also displayed skill in working iron and lived in settled villages. The Bantu arrived in South Africa in small waves rather than in one cohesive migration. Some groups ancestral to the Nguni peoples, such as the Zulu and the Swazi, preferred to live near the coast. Others, now known as the Sotho-Tswana people, settled in the Highveld, while today's Venda, Lemba, and Tsonga peoples made their homes in the northeastern areas of South Africa. Bantu speakers and Khoisan mixed, as evidenced by rock paintings showing the two different groups interacting. The type of contact remains unknown, although linguistic proof of integration survives to prove interaction was well established, as several Bantu languages, notably Xhosa and Zulu, incorporate the click consonant, characteristic of the Khoi-San languages. The Bantu expansion was one of the major demographic movements in human prehistory, sweeping much of the African continent during the second and first millennia before Christ. Bantu-speaking communities reached southern Africa from the Congo Basin by the early centuries after Christ. These major migrations led to the establishment of some of the earliest kingdoms in the history of southern Africa. The kingdom of Makungubwe, which was located near the northern border of present-day South Africa, at the confluence of the Limpopo and Shashe rivers, adjacent to present-day Zimbabwe and Botswana, was the first Bantu kingdom in southern Africa, established in the 11th century. The kingdom was the first stage in a development that would culminate in the creation of the Kingdom of Zimbabwe in the 13th century, and with gold trading links to Rapta and Kisiwani on the African east coast. The Kingdom of Makungubwe lasted about 80 years, and at its height its population was about 5,000 people. The first European historical records about these people begin in the late 15th century, with the beginning of European exploration. The first historical record of South Africa dates to 1488 by Portuguese explorer Bartholomew Dias. In November 1497, a fleet of Portuguese ships under the command of the Portuguese mariner Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape of Good Hope. Historical records of the interior begin significantly later, with the foundation of the Dutch Cape Colony in 1652. Now, let's move on to the cradle of humankind. The cradle of humankind is a paleoanthropological site that is located about 50 kilometers northwest of Johannesburg, South Africa, in the Gauteng province. Declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in 1999, the site is home to the largest known concentration of human ancestral remains anywhere in the world. The site currently occupies 47,000 hectares, or 120,000 acres, and contains a complex system of limestone caves. According to the South African Journal of Science, Bolt's Farm is the place where the earliest primates were discovered. The name Cradle of Humankind reflects the fact that the site has produced a substantially large number of hominin fossils, some of the oldest yet found, dating as far back as 3.5 million years ago. One of the most important sites in the cradle of humankind is the Sterkfontein Caves. The Sterkfontein Caves were the site of the discovery of a 23-million-year-old fossil, Australopithecus africanus, nicknamed Mrs. Pless, which was found in 1947
by Robert Broom and John Robinson. The find helped corroborate the 1924 discovery by Raymond Dart of the juvenile Australopithecus africanus skull, known as the Tong Child, at Tong in the northwest province of South Africa, where excavations still continue. The Sterkfontein Caves have a long and rich history of excavations and exciting discoveries. Let's go through some of the most interesting aspects of the excavations that happen at the Sterkfontein Caves. In 1935, Robert Broom found the first human fossils at Sterkfontein and began work at the site. In 1938, a young schoolboy, Gert de Branch, brought Raymond Dart fragments of a skull from nearby Kromdraai that later were identified as the remains of Paranthropus robustus. Also, in 1938, a single human tooth was found at the Cooper's Cave site between Kromdraai and Sterkfontein. In 1948, the Camp Peabody expedition from the United States worked at Bolt's Farm and Gladysville looking for fossil hominids, but failed to find any. Later, in 1948, Robert Broom identified the first hominid remains from the Swartkrans cave. In 1954, C. K. Brain began working at sites in the cradle, including Cooper's Cave. He then initiated his 3 decades long work at Swartkrans Cave, which resulted in the recovery of the second largest sample of hominid remains from the cradle. The oldest controlled use of fire by Homo erectus was also discovered at Swartkrans and dated to more than 1 million years ago. In 1966, Philip Tobias began his excavations of Sterkfontein that are still continuing and are the longest continuously running fossil excavations in the world. In 1999, Lee Berger of the University of the Witwatersrand discovered the first hominid specimens from the Gladysville site, making it the first new early hominid site to be discovered in South Africa in 48 years. In 1994, Andre Keiser discovered fossil hominids at the site of Drimmelen. In 1997, Kevin Kuykendall and Colin Mentor of the University of Witwatersrand found 2 fossil hominid teeth at the site of Gondolin. Also in 1997, the near-complete Australopithecus skeleton of Littlefoot, then dated to approximately 3.3 million years ago, was discovered by Ron Clark. In 2007, Steve Churchill of Duke University and Lee Berger found early modern human remains at Plovers Lake. Also in 2001, the first hominid fossils and stone tools were discovered in situ at Cooper's Cave. In 2008, Lee Berger discovered the partial remains of two hominids, Australopithecus sediba, who lived between 1.78 and 1.9 million years ago in the Malapa fossil site. In October 2013, Berger commissioned geologist Pedro Boshoff to investigate cave systems in the cradle of humankind for the express purpose of discovering more fossil hominin sites. Cavers Rick Hunter and Stephen Tucker discovered hominid fossils in a previously unexplored area of the Rising Star Westminster cave system. In November 2013, Berger led a joint expedition of the University of the Witwatersrand and the National Geographic Society to the Rising Star cave system near Swartkrans. In just 3 weeks of excavation, the 6-woman international team of advanced speleological scientists, chosen for their paleoanthropological and caving skills, as well as their small size, recovered more than 1,200 fossil specimens of an unidentified hominin species. As of 2015, the site remained in the process of being dated. In September 2015, Berger, in collaboration with National Geographic, announced the discovery of a new species of human relative named Homo naledi. Most remarkably, besides shedding light on the origins and diversity of the Homo genus, Homo naledi also appears to have intentionally deposited bodies of its dead in a remote cave chamber, a behavior previously thought limited to later Homo species. In the last days of the Rising Star expedition, cavers Rick Hunter and Stephen Tucker discovered additional fossil hominid material in another portion of the cave system. Preliminary excavations at this site had begun by 2013 and yielded complete hominid fossil material on its own. The relationship of this site to the site of Homo naledi is not yet known. In general, the hominin remains that fossilized over time at the cradle of humankind are found in dolomite caves and are often encased in a mixture of limestone and other sediments called breccia. Early hominids may have lived throughout Africa, but their remains are found only at sites where conditions allowed for the formation and preservation of such fossils. As you can probably tell, this single site has yielded multiple avenues of study within the field of paleoanthropology, and we can all thank the power of the Sterkfontein Caves for its contribution not only to South African history, but to human history. So, from cave paintings to ancient kingdoms, South Africa has one of the richest human histories on Earth. And we're just getting started. In our next lecture, we'll zoom in on the cradle itself and meet one of our strangest cousins, Homo naledi. Thank you for listening, and I hope to hear from you soon.